Welcome to GroundZero Salem 3.0, back in Salem, as always, now and forever. I'm your host, Pat. So, I've been a very busy guy the past half a year or so. As I mentioned before I departed, my end of 2024 video, best of thing, whatever, I was moving from North Carolina, and it's been a long, arduous process of living in and out of Airbnbs for a couple of months, house hunting, getting back to work, going back to the same place I worked at actually before I moved, same hospital, and just getting reacclimated. We just had the last of our stuff delivered. We had most of our belongings in those pod things. We had 2 of them full of crap, full of stuff. Last one finally got dropped off, so I am going to be finally unpacking everything into my new little record room here, my little office. I'll probably do a tour at some point. It's smaller than the last one, but the downstairs area of my new place is huge, so I think I'm gonna dedicate some of that to like movie stuff and other stuff like that I had crammed into the old bonus room. Anyways, I hope everybody's been well, despite all the turbulence with moving states and everything that entails. I'm still as passionate about music as ever, still picking stuff up, going off in different directions and pursuing different sounds. The big theme with me while I was kind of in the process of moving, I felt like it was very thematic. It wasn't a deliberate move, but I occasionally go back into different genres, and I got re-obsessed with a lot of doom, which happens to me like every couple of years, a lot of doom metal stuff, but there's certain things that kind of go hand in hand with doom, namely old 70s proto-metal stuff, psychedelic music, some prog. I'm very picky about my prog. I only like prog if it's poorly recorded and really drug-addled. I'm not into that clean stuff, like Later Yes or like Dream Theater, and no thank you. But like weird stuff that's more along the lines of King Crimson and anything that sounds like that, I'm totally down for. So I've been exploring a lot of that kind of stuff. It was a really brutal New England winter, oddly enough. I hadn't experienced a winter like that, and I grew up in upstate New York, up near, I just internally hiccup there, like my dog does. I grew up in upstate New York where you're buried under a glacier for or at least you were when I was growing up. I mean, climate change is definitely a thing. But in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, you were under a glacier for like 8 months. And this winter actually kind of brought back those sort of memories. It was kind of pleasant in a way, very calm and serene. The cold didn't really bother me, especially because I was renting. I didn't have to shovel anything. But I digress. So, a lot of frozen, doomy kind of stuff going on. Happy to be back on the North Shore. I do miss Sorry State Records, but there's some great record stores around here. The always impressive Residency, which has expanded, gotten bigger, got a lot of great stock in these days. There's a new one in neighboring Beverly, new record store called Big Fun, which is fantastic. Bridge 9, the hardcore label, has their own record store in Beverly. There's the Salem Record Exchange, which is a long running classic record store. So I've been perusing them, doing a lot less online shopping, and just kind of hanging out, doing the brick and mortar thing, picking up albums, kind of going down some weird wormholes. Finally broke the seal with getting into the Melvins. I avoided that band for so long just because the overly artiness and the sort of fanboyism, the fanboy love for them. People are so into that band, and sometimes it's a little off-putting. I kind of realized late in life that the reason why people are really into them is because they're wholly unique and very good at what they do. So I don't have anything pulled out to show off of all the Melvin stuff that I've picked up, but I'm probably going to show off some records at some point. Yeah, so I've just been exploring all types of stuff. Slowed down a little with buying stuff because I was in between jobs for a while. Not to say that I haven't bought a ton of stuff between my last update and now. So what I decided I'd do, I was kind of overthinking this and hemming and hawing about it for far too long. What would be the theme? What would I talk about? Should I do recent pickups or what's spinning? That's been done to death, but those things are always fun to do. I figured I would just kind of do that, but pick just a pile of random albums. Maybe I'll splice in some images of how I have my records arranged now. That'll probably make things interesting. I'll probably do that. I have my new setup for all my vinyl in these kind of shelves that have like flip bins on the top. So it feels like a small record store, maybe a hole-in-the-wall record store in New York City or something like that. I was going for something like that where you could actually look through records on top, and a lot of the new purchases that I've made, before filing, I've put at the top. So you can just kind of go through and look at it, and it kind of feels like your own little record store experience, you know, in my room here. I've just kind of randomly flipped through that and just pulled out stuff that I've picked up in the last like 6 months. I have enough of that to probably pull out like 3 or 4 or 5 piles to talk about for a half an hour at a time, because we know how I buy stuff, you know. Maybe a little bit of a problem. I'm working on it. So I have a whole stack of vinyl here. The CDs are put away. I have all my shelves set up to file all my CDs. So my recent pickup CDs, I alphabetized, put on Discogs, and put in a closet because I have to file all of them very soon. So yeah, I've been going down a couple of different roads. Other than the Doom stuff, weird, skronky, you know, oddball, anti-music kind of stuff like Butthole Surfers and Flipper. I've liked the Swans for a long time, but I've been kind of repurchasing some stuff and checking out some of the earlier, more previously to me, more inaccessible kind of sounding records like Filth. Been enjoying that stuff a little bit more. You know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Some industrial, kind of picked up some holes in my collection for Skinny Puppy stuff, etc., etc. So, with that long rambling monologue out of the way, let's talk about a few of the things I've picked up in the past during my break, during my hiatus. Up top of the pile, this Sarcofagus LP. This was Cycle of Life. This was put out by Nuclear War Now fairly recently, past couple of years. They released their other album as well. This is brilliant Finnish proto-metal, I guess. I mean, it's the way I see it, it's kind of bridging the gap between old heavy metal, before the term heavy metal was really coined, and the new wave of British heavy metal sound. There's a healthy amount of like 70s prog elements on this. There's like some Moog keyboards and stuff like that, but the riffing is very heavy. You can certainly hear, you know, something comparable to early new wave of British heavy metal, Raven and Iron Maiden and stuff like that. They're kind of Sabbathy as well. I really like this band a lot. I like the other one as well. The other release, which the name escapes me, was the first one that I had, and as soon as I saw this on the shelf, I knew I had to pick it up. Not sure which one came first. Didn't research that far. Then we have this new Scalple, Skillful Butchery. This is a New York band, Crust band. I like this a lot, and if I'm not mistaken, Willow, the guitarist, is also in Flower, who put out one of my favorite Crust records of last year. And this is awesome crust punk because it's not a worship project like so many others. Not that I have an issue with bands like heavily emulating bands that came before them. Obviously, Flower had a big Nausea, New York kind of vibe, as well as some other influences going on. You know, Lifeless Dark has a sort of sacrilege thing, again, with tasteful other influences creeping in. Scalple almost brings me back to like the 90s and Profane Existence and bands like Misery and Ass Rash and Civil Disobedience and the like, and other bands that weren't necessarily on that label, but bands that were kind of creating their own sound, mashing together a bunch of different stuff. There is a little bit of kind of that squealy Sacrilege Bolt Thrower kind of riffing on this here and there, but they're not directly doing, they're certainly not doing like a stadium melodic crust kind of thing. There's a lot of elements of like kind of grind and straight up like angry punk on it. It's a really well put together album, and it sort of keeps you guessing. It's not a one trick pony all the way through, which is a good thing. Then I don't have it on me because at some point I'll do CDs too. I went down a wormhole of like, oh, what's this label? What's this all about kind of thing. I found a band called Lucifer Was from Norway, and it was kind of a pagan altar kind of situation in that The album was recorded sometime in the late 90s. I want to say like 97 or something like that, but all the music was written in the late 60s or early 70s. And it's this heavy, kind of like right in between Black Sabbath and Jethro Tull, kind of riffy. It's got flute on it. If you like Blood Ceremony, you'd probably dig that band if you like flute in your riffs. And I wanted to look into what else was on the label. It's this reissue label called Sommor, Sommor. And I mean, this was kind of a no-brainer, a band called Three-Headed Dog. Name of the album is Hound of Hades. And this is a 6-song recording. I don't know if it's just an unearthed demo or what. It certainly sounds like it. The hype sticker says UK underground hard rock and early Judas Priest and Wishbone Ash style. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I haven't listened to Rock-a-Rolla in a minute, and maybe musically it's like this. The vocals are way more of a smoky croon, and it's not like he's hitting Rob Halford high-pitched stuff. Not that that's an easy feat by any stretch of the imagination, but it's good, very rough recording. I think that's why I like unearthing this stuff, is that it's so unintentionally punk, you know, it's so raw. It's good. It's not very distorted and heavy. Like the guitars are relatively almost kind of clean. They're a bit fuzzy, but it's got this sort of noodling, I'm trying to remember from my guitar lesson days, but that sort of metal kind of like structure to the leads and the riffs, like pentatonic scales, I guess. Maybe I'm just pulling that out of my ass, but it's got that other than blues influence, that's sort of like maybe a little bit of folk or classical, kind of making it sound evil, you know, the devil's tone or the devil's riff or whatever. Then we've got Second Sign. This is the other band I checked out from Sommor. Very rare UK mid-70s hard/progressive rock/blues featuring female vocalist Irene Minash. Similar to Narnia, Saturnalia, and Frup. Okay, I guess I have some homework. I'm not familiar with any of the above. I think they're kind of weird prog bands from the 70s, which is, something I'm not that knowledgeable about. But this is cool. It veers almost into proto-metal territory a few times. But there's a lot of folkiness on it. I'm a big fan of a handful of those like 70s like folk rock kind of bands, like Pentangle. I like them a lot, and Fairport Convention and Strawbs and stuff like that. And this feels kind of like that stuff a little bit. It seems like the same kind of ballpark of like, obviously not Americana folk, but like, Ren Fairish kind of folk here and there. Like really beautiful, kind of angelic vocals, courtesy of, what was her name? Irene? Yes, courtesy of Irene. At a certain point, the male and female vocals are kind of layered over each other in a really melodic way, and it's cool. It's a good listen. It's also super raw punk recording, unintentionally so. Then I talked about this on one of I think the first year I was making videos. I got some real bargain lot on eBay with this record and Nasm, and I think a Phobia Live split with Plutocracy and something else. I got this sweet deal of like $30 from probably some punk dude, because it was packaged really badly when it arrived. But I love this LP. My copy was pretty partied on. It was the original 625 thrash pressing. Immortal Fate, beautiful. This got repressed on 625 again and some other labels. Rescued from Life and Nuclear Ass Records. So if you're not familiar with Immortal Fate, it's fantastic early 90s death metal. You can certainly hear some regional influences. They were a Bay Area band. They started as like a straight up thrash metal band, Bay Area thrash. By the time this came out, it was incredibly heavy, sort of non-linear, punishing, brutal death metal stuff. I think there's some surface level comparisons you can make to early Incantation, but in that, like, they don't really follow a specific path with choruses or anything like that. It's kind of got that twisty turny song structure that Incantation and many bands that imitated them have. But this band was around when they were around, and I think that's the main similarity, is the weird song structures. The sound itself is way more crisp and in your face and dry. There's a bit of at least with the drumming on a few songs, when it goes into fast parts, you can certainly hear like almost sort of a punk kind of grind thing going on. And I believe they had some connections with some grind punk bands, power violence, if you will, from the Bay Area. I think like Agents of Satan or No Less, or both, shared a member, or one of the guys was brothers with another, I forget, but they were, you know, connected with that scene. I think they played some Slap a Ham shows and stuff like that. But excellent death metal. I will say also they do the doom death thing really well, or maybe death doom, you know, whatever you prefer. You know, they're certainly getting influence from their local heroes, Autopsy, in that regard. Fucking great band. Really like cavernous, punishing, low, indecipherable vocals. And I've burnt out on modern bands having vocals like that. Like, I'm all set with anybody new. But this guy and like the guy from Infester, and of course, like, you know, early Incantation vocals and stuff like that. Like, I'm always on board for. How we doing with time? I gotta go to work in 20 minutes, so. Okay, we're doing good. Here's a band I remember hearing about all the time, seeing them in ads and magazines, and seeing them. I think I had a sampler or two with them on it. They were originally on Relapse. Nightstick, Blotter. And I always wrote them off because a friend of mine saw them live and was like, yeah, that band has a clown. And I was like, nope, no thank you. That sounds like it sucks. Yep, there's a clown right there. Really bizarre, tortured sludge, I guess, I would say. You know, doomy, scraping, sort of like really repetitive. I feel like a lot of sludge, particularly I Hate God and Buzz Oven, has a pretty pronounced influence from bands like Flipper. There's like this notion of like just punishing your audience with the feedback. You know, a lot of the bands that utilize feedback and stuff like that. And Nightstick are definitely no exception to that. I feel like they kind of do it more than any of the aforementioned. The beginning of the first song, Workers of the World Unite, is just like, I think it's a bass riff, but it's just distorted, punishing bass guitar for, I don't know, what feels like 5 minutes. It's probably not that long. And then it goes into Workers of the World Unite, you know, a call for the Socialist Workers' Party, I guess.
Revolutionary biscuits of Italy, rise up out of your box. You have nothing to lose but your wafers. Yum, 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 yum. I never really...
I'm all right because my daddy's bought me the Socialist Workers' Party for my birthday!
Really just twisted. You know, it's got that little bit of a Sabbath groove to it, just a touch. I feel like these guys in Grief, being the other huge classic sludge band from the East Coast that first thing that springs to mind when I think of like the Northeast, you know, they obviously had that sort of influence. Like, there's no way to play anything slow and heavy. Well, there are ways to play stuff that's slow and heavy without a Sabbath influence, but the sludge bands, it's hard to get away from that, you know? I feel like if you veer too far, you just end up sounding like Swans or Flipper, and it's not really sludge. But at any rate, there is that little bit of, you know, the bending riffs and everything that are probably lifted from Sabbath and other 70s hard rock bands, but it's so minimalist and so cold compared to, I'd say, like the New Orleans stuff, you know, or any band from anywhere else. Really punishing stuff. Set Controls for the Heart of the Sun. Mommy, What's a Funkadelic is the first song on the second side. And it really crescendos, picks up the pace a lot on the last track, and just, it's a really good ending to the album. It's very, very intense. Very, very cool band. This is a band that I started listening to them because this was right before I moved, right before we packed everything up. I was like, I think I'm gonna really get into Nightstick now. And I just ended up buying all 3 of their releases and listening to them constantly. Found a t-shirt on Depop, you know, the whole 9. Cool stuff. Oh, I should also mention, just nerdy, whatever, ex-members of, the drummer is Robert Williams, who is the drummer of Siege, who are a massive influence. You should know, if you didn't. Massive influence on Napalm Death. Kind of helped invent grindcore, power violence, all that stuff. Is like a blueprint for bands like Infest. You know, massively important early 80s Massachusetts hardcore band. And you can hear where they were going, because Siege have a song called Grim Reaper that's this long dirge with like weird saxophone all over it. So, just an echo of things to come, if you will. But yeah, good stuff, and very challenging and harsh. Kind of in the same way Siege was, but just coming from a completely different angle, tempo-wise. All right, Groundhogs. This is kind of a blind buy. I knew the name. I knew it was associated with like British rock, hard rock, blues, I guess. Cool like die cut there. And from what I could gather, just reading a little bit of the liner notes, like this was kind of along the same wave as the Yardbirds and Cream and all these British musicians that were borrowing, if you want to be kind, taking a lot from Delta blues from the States and everything like that. They call this album Blues Funeral because it's their send-off. Like, we're not going to be playing the blues after this. We're going to be doing more rock. I'm not familiar with their stuff after this at all. Completely new to this, mostly ignorant to this band. But you can tell, I mean, it is heavily bluesy rock and roll, but it is starting to go in the direction of what was to come. This was recorded in '69. So, I believe after this they got a little bit heavier. I don't know if they went in more of a Zeppelin direction. But it's taking the framework of like traditional blues and putting some interesting spins on stuff and kind of expanding the sound and the song structures and everything like that. It's cool. It's a cool listen. I don't commonly listen to stuff this bluesy, so it's been a nice change up from what I'm used to. Oh, I guess paired with everything else that it kind of all made sense in my brain of like exploring all these different sounds was, the doom stuff and proto-doom, proto-metal, and also pre-punk or very early punk, proto-punk, whatever you want to call it. Stuff that certainly influenced all the British bands, Sex Pistols and everything. Biggest, of course, what do you think of that is the Stooges and MC5, but also the Dictators from New York. This one came after the punk explosion. I think this was like 80 maybe. They have a couple of other records. Dictators Go Girl Crazy, and another one that the name is escaping me. I'll edit it in. That, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they were like 75, 76, so before the explosion of the Pistols and the Damned and all that stuff. And those previous records, they had the attitude of punk, but they're very much like kind of hard rock, up tempo, but it's got that 70s kind of rock and roll groove to it. There's a lot of elements of this record that have that as well, Blood Brothers. But this record, you can hear more like kind of Johnny Thunders style kind of stuff going on with it. It's still like halfway hard rock, which is really what I want with a lot of the music that I've been listening to lately, like good ballsy riffs, but enough attitude and speed to keep me interesting. One thing I should mention, if you weren't aware, Ross the Boss also ended up in Manowar after this. But yeah, great tunes on this. I Stand Tall is definitely the earworm. I stand tall. I am wicked proud of who I am. Those aren't the actual lyrics. I butchered that with Massachusetts colloquialism, but there you go. Great stuff, super catchy. Circle One, Patterns of Force. This is a band reading about old LA punk I always wanted to check out. After you get into like Adolescence and Circle Jerks and TSOL and all that, there's the kind of like the undercurrent of the lesser known bands that are probably pretty well known now, but I'm talking like late 90s, early 2000s, like around the time the American Hardcore book came out and the internet was kind of exploding. We were all like learning about like really, really underground stuff at the time. And Circle One was one of those bands, somewhat for their music. I know that their demos were like pretty raw, fast hardcore, but a lot of it had to do with their singer, John Macias, who was kind of a notorious figure. If you've ever seen Another State of Mind, which is a documentary about social distortion and Youth Brigade going on tour across the United States, there's a brief interview with John Macias where it's like this weird punk church. It's like all punk kids, but they're like, they found God and they're like AA, like on the wagon kind of stuff. It's very kind of odd.
How many times has someone come to you and said, friend, What you're doing to yourself is wrong. The way you're living is not right. You need to turn around. Has anyone ever said that to you? And what was your reaction? Did you just go ahead right on and do whatever you want to do? Or did you listen when people tried to tell you that you're making a mistake? You know the devil will get you to go to any extremes. The devil loves extremes. He'd like for you to be somewhere cutting yourself, deforming yourself, and abusing your body somehow, some way. That's one of the devil's tricks today.
What we're trying to achieve here is we've opened our house up to anyone that wants to change, that wants to find Christ, that wants to get off the streets, that wants to definitely get an improvement in their lives, get their lives on the right track. We allow kids to stay here, we give them food, we do as much as we can. Everyone that comes here has been from a divorced family. That has been the major problem that we've seen, is the family has fallen apart on these kids. They come here and they have nothing. They have no place to live, no money, no food. We can't turn them out.
Back to the basic question, if you're a punk rocker, yes, you can get saved. But I think very definitely after you are truly born again, you'll hear that still small voice begin to talk to you about particular things in your life that would be displeasing to God. But as far as the punk rock music, I'm not really that familiar with it. My own opinion would be that it does not bring God much glory.
We were both part of the punk scene. We both found Jesus Christ, who changed our lives drastically. Where you had a monster and an alcoholic, or both of the same.
Yes, close.
And we both, he really helped us. He's played a major part in both of our lives.
He's one of the reformed, punks that's found God in it. Sadly, that's not the last we heard from him. There's a Henry Rollins stand-up. I can post a little bit of it and maybe post a link to it. It's a storytelling bit where he talks about how this guy, who I believe had bipolar disorder, or maybe even schizophrenia or something, very mentally ill, freaked out and was threatening people on the California pier and got shot by a cop and died.
John gets off his medication. John finds himself in Santa Monica, about 7 miles north of the airport. He goes into this breakfast place, some small diner place, orders some breakfast. Food comes, John's eating away, drops the fork, starts talking to the ceiling of the restaurant. The devil is coming, Satan is coming, ah ha 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 ha! The owner of the restaurant goes, right, and calls the cops, get this big, bald guy laughing at my ceiling out of my restaurant. The cops come, you gotta leave, we heard you were laughing at the ceiling, I don't know, there's some kind of code against it, you gotta go. John leaves peaceably, they go out onto the sidewalk, and it was a quote in the LA Times, this is what John said to the cop, he said, "God will see that you die, pig." Which I think is just one of the slickest one-liners I have ever heard. I mean, that's right up there with Henny Youngman, Fred Nietzsche, all those guys, man. So John proceeds north, up the street, and he goes to the Santa Monica Pier. There's a guard standing on the pier sidewalk, one of those rent-a-cop guys. Guys who guard cement. Picks up the security guard, throws him off the side. Which is kind of funny if you think that he fell into the water into a bunch of pelican shit and swam to shore. Ah, ha, 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 you got wet. The big psycho threw you off the side. Ah, ha, ha. He fell onto a cement access road and broke nearly every damn bone in his body. Not so hot. He arrives at the scene, sees John pulling a guy out of his car. He says, "Stop, let that guy go, freeze." John turns around, sees the cop, drops the guy, goes after the cop. The cop fired his gun 6 times.
So, really intense guy, tragic ending to him. But when he was in his element, apparently he was kind of like trying to, keep people from fighting and stuff like that. Like there's all kinds of inner gang violence between different factions in the early LA punk scene. And I think he was occasionally somebody who beat the crap out of people, but he also was a big unity guy.
So anyway, Years go by and John becomes like, punk rock judge of the scene. You see two punk rockers beating the snot out of each other, like Timmy Snot is fighting, Joey Spike. And all of a sudden you see these two guys fighting each other and they're up in the air. John is holding them up. Don't fight. You, shake hands with him. You, shake hands with him. Now embrace. Unite. Off they go to thrash some more. You wanted peace in the scene. Punks unite. And you're like, damn, John, man, you are serious. The guy was intense,
I don't know. There's a lot of interesting stories about him, so I encourage everybody to just kind of check it out, especially that Rollins stand-up. It's pretty interesting. But the band he's in, Circle One, he was in, is pretty interesting. By the time they recorded this is an alternate mix. I'll have to check out or try to track down the original. This, I feel like they tried to pretty up the guitars and clean a few things up. The vocals are kind of tough to get around, at least on the first song. I think once you get past the first song, things kind of level out, but it almost sounds like John is trying to bridge the gap between Jack Grisham from TSOL and Jello Biafra. It has a slight kind of post-punk vibe to a lot of the songs. There's sort of spooky elements to it, kind of melodic stuff, very high energy. It's not slow or anything for the most part, but his vocals are kind of, kind of all over the place. But at a certain point, I listen to this record every day for a week. There's something oddly really compelling about it and catchy. But it's cool. If you like California hardcore punk with maybe just a tinge of death rock or goth, just a little bit, they were clearly listening to Dance With Me and Beneath the Shadows era TSOL when they recorded this, because I can definitely hear the influence. It's definitely cool. Then I picked this up at the Salem Record Exchange. How we doing on time? All right. I got maybe 10 more minutes. I'm under the gun. I should mention that I got an email that I might lose my YouTube partnership. Oh no. I mean, I think I've made $300 total from AdSense since I started this channel. I'm not really concerned about taking the loss money-wise. It's more that, I want eyeballs on my stuff when I spend 45 minutes yapping into a camera and then 5 to 8 editing things together. So anyways, I got to get this out there to keep myself in good standing. At any rate, I digress once more. This is a band called Atavistic. This is late 80s British crust. After, deep diving into all those bands Deviated Instinct and Axe Grinder and all that kind of stuff, going a little further into maybe stuff that might not be as well known, like Mortal Terror. This name sounded vaguely familiar to me and I couldn't place it. And what it is that this band was supposed to be the band on the B-side of Scum from Napalm Death. Napalm Death Scum was supposed to be a split LP, and I think the album Vanishing Point was supposed to be on the other side. If not, it was supposed to be some other recording. But this is a weird, probably unofficial boot of their discography, which is 2 7-inches and an LP. The 7 inches aren't too different from a lot of that really ugly stenchcore stuff, bordering on grind, kind of blurry, loose, sloppy crust from the UK. It's decent for what it is. The full length really fascinates me. And every time I listen to it, I hear something new. I did check in on a Facebook group I'm in with a lot of old head types like myself, people that have, few people that have maybe a decade or two on me, that some people from the UK that were around for this band, they're nothing special. It was weird, crappy crossover. But yeah, it is sloppy. But I really admire their ambition, because it's got there's moments where it sounds like Motorhead. It's got that charging kind of Lemmy bass, but it's some weird effect and really oddly noodly sounding. They've got harmonica on a bunch of songs. There's some songs that almost go into crossover, straight up mosh parts. There's certainly plenty of elements of sort of dischargey stuff. There's elements that kind of remind me of Heresy and other bands that were around in the era, Concrete Socks and that kind of thing. But what an interesting band, I thought this was really cool. And in a way, it's kind of like a spiritual cousin or older cousin, spiritual uncle, to that Scalple record, because I think that Scalple record had a lot of different things going on with it as well, and same kind of monochromatic theme, you know. This was a record store day purchase. I actually went out for record store day this year and bought a bunch of stuff. I only grabbed this just because I, along with Melvins and Butthole Surfers and other bands I've been kind of deep diving on, I've been into Wire for a long time. I actually did not learn from them from Minor Threat, because Minor Threat covered 12XU. Actually became familiar with them because of a compilation on Rhino Records called Faster and Louder Hardcore Punk, where it was all Germs, Black Flag, Circle Jerks, etc., etc. Some lesser known stuff at the time, you know, like the Dicks and bands that kind of experienced a resurgence in popularity, but were certainly obscure to me then. Great early 80s primer on hardcore punk, from really well-known stuff to fairly not that well-known stuff. Wire was on it. I don't know why. Like, this British post-punk band. Granted, I think a lot of their stuff on Pink Flag really, you could hear the influence on Minor Threat. They had all these like very short, you know, less than a minute long songs, and there weren't too many bands doing that at the time, but some of their stuff was really spacey and dreamy and almost sounded like Joy Division. So, you know, they were a cool band. I just started exploring them past Pink Flag, their debut LP. Started picking up some of their demo stuff, which is like really raw, like kind of nasty, snotty punk, like 77 almost, kind of. The Chairs Missing LP, I picked that up as well. That starts to go a little bit more mellow, although there's some pretty good, like, straightforward punk songs on it. And this is just a singles collection. It's a double LP, record store day thing that came out, and it's all their 7 inches up till the early 80s. So you get all the hits. You get like Mannequin and 12XU and Pink Flag, Ex-Lion Tamer, possibly my favorite song from them. And then you start getting into weird stuff later. Get Down parts 1 and 2. It gets kind of like oddly slow and bizarre. But yeah, I mean, Wire's awesome, you know. Check out Wire if you haven't checked out Wire. Wire. Then we've got Inepsy with the shrink still on it. I should take that off. Happy to see that Rock and Roll Babylon. Happy to see that Tank Crimes is reissuing all their stuff. Quebecois, early 2000s, pretty much like coined the notion of motor charge stuff. I mean, there are other bands that were doing that well before, but I think like really solidified it into a really cohesive, like catchy, extremely well-written micro genre. And I remember getting this when it came out and being like, man, I don't even really hear that much punk. I hear like almost like straight up Motorhead worship. Kind of go back on that a little bit now that my ears are so much more like well-cultured. I have nuanced eardrums. You can hear a lot, especially the faster parts, like the approach rhythmically with the drums definitely feels like pretty more indebted to UK punk, but that gets muddy because how much of that stuff was heavily influenced by Motorhead, you know? It's a big mess. But at any rate, it's a beautiful, glorious mess. Inepsy's incredible. I recommend people that love all genres. The music's just so well written. I've met people that don't like Motorhead that like Inepsy. You know what I mean? Awesome band. Glad to see that Tank Crimes is doing them justice. Cool aquamarine vinyl there. Possibly my favorite record of theirs. They got a little bit more like new wave of British heavy metal outside of Motorhead influence, like some kind of like Tank and stuff going on, like on their next one, No Speed Limit. Didn't like that record at first, but it's really grown on me, so that one's good too. Subculture. Here's a whoopsie, I'm a dum-dum kind of scenario. This band was from Raleigh. I lived in Raleigh, as you know, for almost 3 years. My friend who works at Sorry State, his Instagram handle is I Heard a Scream. I never knew what that was in reference to. I didn't figure out who this band was until I moved away. I saw that Sorry State was reissuing this EP, and that it was, I guess, really similar to primo era, thrash era, Corrosion of Conformity. So how can I say no to that? You know, I've got a big COC tattoo on my elbow, and this is awesome. I never knew about this band. I knew about a lot of the other kind of local bands to that area. I knew like the No Core compilation and stuff, and bands that came later, like in the 2000s, like Double Negative. Never knew. Maybe I heard about Subculture and it just flew out the other ear. But it wasn't until I moved back to Boston where I was like, oh, this awesome hardcore band with like metal influences, you know, definitely my bread and butter were from Raleigh, and no idea. But 6-song EP, it's great. I mean, if you like 6 songs with Mike singing era, COC and Animosity, got a lot of similarities to that. Like something about just how the speed is like this controlled chaos. The velocity of it is, it's fast and it's tight, but it could fall apart any minute. There's something that about COC and the way they did that, hard to replicate. Subculture comes pretty close. Their other LP, the I Heard a Scream record, is very good. I'd say only a few songs on that one verge on metal. A lot, it's more of a straightforward like US hardcore LP, but it's definitely excellent. This was a revisit. Had this on CD way back in the day when it came out, like early to mid 2000s. Dungen Tadet Lungt. This is Swedish. This came out in the early 2000s. Incredibly catchy stuff. You know, very like almost entrancing, mellow, prog, kind of folky rock stuff. All the lyrics are in Swedish, and I find myself singing along to it. That doesn't really happen with most like non-English kind of things. I don't know what the words mean, but I definitely kind of like phonetically try to reproduce what the guy's singing. That's a good sign. It's a great, catchy kind of psych record, psych prog kind of record from the early 2000s. Yeah, I'd definitely say it's more psych than prog actually, but that weird 70s prog that isn't like, you know, nerd stuff, you know, more like drugged out maniac kind of prog. And then we've got Spike Pit. Back for revenge on that ass. On Big Spike Says Fuck You Records. This is a Clevo band. Cleveland rarely disappoints as far as like their hardcore and punk stuff goes. I've been a fan of stuff coming out of that city for a very long time. This is a fine continuation of that spirit. Again, also, you know, in the vein of stuff like Subculture and maybe Atavistic and a few other bands that I've mentioned. It's thrashy, it's not too tight, it sounds like it's going off the rails. It's got a lot of like choking up on the E, like really fast picking. Great use of like melodic, like face melting solos and melodies and stuff like that. Like the beginning of this certainly sounds to me like some kind of Burning Spirits, Japanese hardcore kind of thing. They do break it down and rock out occasionally. There's the occasional kind of Motorhead flourish. It's really, really attitude laden and raw recording, you know, not like buried and shitty like it's been recorded on a Tascam under somebody's laundry basket or something. But certainly doesn't sound touched up digitally, like feels very like live and raw and in your face. It's one of my favorite hardcore records to come out this year. Not that I've checked out a lot. Haven't really been that interested in checking out new hardcore, but this is definitely towards the top of the heap for me. Then this is a band I've been into. This is also on Some More. This is Black Widow, Return to the Sabbath. This is a previously unreleased LP, acetate-only album. It's a cult rock prog. It's like a really evil Jethro Tull. You know, I remember discovering like all that proto-metal stuff a long time ago now. I started checking out stuff like Flower Traveling Band and Necromandus and Sir Lord Baltimore and all that stuff. Like, I don't know. Time flies, man. I want to say I was about to go into X-ray school, so it was, and I've been a tech for a very long time now, so I want to say like 2008, 2009. I started exploring that stuff, and Black Widow was one of the first ones that I hit up. I did buy their other album, what is it called? Sacrifice. I did buy Sacrifice. I own Sacrifice on CD. This is a lot rawer. And it's just it's very foggy, and like it's not like Sabbath heavy. Like I said, it kind of reminds me of Tull, you know. But it's very foreboding. I mean, it's very like weirdly, you know, satanic and stuff, especially for the time. Come to the Sabbath with the repetition of that chorus gets pretty spooky. You know, if you dig stuff like Coven, that's, you know, obviously of its time, but also very like of that whole era of cults and people being interested in that while they're doing heavy psychedelic drugs. I'd say, you know, Black Widow would probably be up your alley, and especially if you like modern occult rock revival kind of stuff like Blood Ceremony and Uncle Acid and that stuff. I've gone crazy on Uncle Acid lately. I've bought like all their stuff. It's weird. I just ignored them until 3 months ago. All right. Finally, another band along the same lines here, Lucifer's Friend. Great German hard rock stuff. There's this, the first song is so close to Immigrant Song. It's almost feels like, it almost feels like there should be a copyright issue going on. But instead of the, you know, Robert Plant with a, it's like this horn, it sounds like an elephant blast, you know, but it's great. Super real commanding, clear, like sung, hollered kind of vocals. Dude reminds me of Klaus Meine from Scorpions, and they were around the same time. I mean, Lonesome Crow came out in, I want to say 71 or 72. Maybe it just has something to do with being German and singing in English and just the way the enunciation comes through. I don't know. But I mean, this is great, solid, like early heavy metal, hard rock stuff. Very, very well done. I know they got a little bit more like proggy and almost kind of AOR-ish like later. I had one of their records way ahead of this. I want to say their 4th or 5th LP. And it was fine, but this is where it's at. I mean, you got organs on it. You got the Hammond organ going. So, you know, certainly if you dig Deep Purple and Uriah Heep and that kind of thing, if you like organs, this should be up your alley. And I got to point out Billingsgate Records, not to be confused with the hardcore band on Victory from the early 90s. Their logo is just this gigantic butt and somebody about to kick the big butt. There's like a serious BBL going on there and somebody that's mad about that. And I think that's very funny because I am mentally and emotionally 12 years old. Okay. All right. So that was fun. We got 43 minutes. All right. This is going to be one of them updates, boys. I hope everybody's doing well. I'll be back with these soon. I want to get back into the swing of these things and get back to everything I was doing before. We just decided it was time to get out of North Carolina. My better half got a new job. Time to come back up here. So just kind of starting everything back up again. Change is good, you know? All right. I'll be talking to you folks soon. Sound off in the comments if you have any comments, if you have any thoughts. It's great to always hear from my regular viewers. I hope everybody's doing well out there. If you get around to it, you know, share the video around. You know, I don't really care that much if I lose my monetization. But like I said, I enjoy making these videos when I feel the little pangs of inspiration. But I do want people to see them. So, you know, I want to keep my face out there. Keep talking about what I like to talk about. That's about it for now. Take care. Don't take any wooden nickels. Take care of yourself. Yada, yada, yada.